Stan, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the posh part of Selhurst Park.
It is. Changed a little bit since I was here as a wet behind the ear 19-year-old, but it's great to see how Crystal Palace as a club has progressed under the new ownership and in the Premier League, of course, and hopefully survival assured or not far off for another season.
And you're here doing a bit of after-dinner speaking. Is it something you do quite a lot of?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, I'm so busy now with a lot of games. But when I was asked, it was a great opportunity to come down and to speak at a club that had a huge impact on me and my career, really. So not too much. I tend to be very, very busy with what I do. And if I'm not busy talking about football, I'm usually busy tweeting about football. So, but it's great to be back. Yeah,
talking very much your thing these days. How are you enjoying working in the media?
I love it. I mean, as a footballer, I can remember many times driving from Villa Park or from Anfield in particular, and listening to a lot of phone-ins that were hosted by people like David Mellor, that was a politician, or DJ Spoonie, that was obviously a DJ. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great when I finish to broadcast and kind of have phone-ins or debate shows hosted by footballers? So for me, when the opportunity came about 7 or 8 years ago, I jumped at it. I had the opportunity to do lots of games. I do about 50, 60 games a season at the grounds, which for me I prefer rather than sitting in a studio, because you obviously can see everything that's going on. And then post-match to be able to do debate shows where fans are driving back from all parts of the country suits me down to a T. So I think it's gone well, and it's something that I thoroughly enjoy.
Just going back in time a bit to your time when you were at this club. You joined from Stafford Rangers.
I did.
What do you remember about how the move came about?
Well, I remember that Steve Coppell came and watched a game. I'd been chosen to play for an England non-league 11, and it was at Willenhall Town, and it was towards the end of the season on a ploughed pitch. They'd literally ploughed the pitch ready to seed it for the next season. It was played on furrows. And a couple of my mates came from Cannock, where I live, and then this kind of big purple Mercedes rolled up about 10 minutes into the first half. And there was a little shed, little cow shed at Willenhall Town, and Steve Coppell sidled up to, where there was only a group of 5 or 6 people watching. And my mates recognised him straight away. One of my mates is a big Man United fan, so he was one of his idols, Steve. And he just said, "Who have you come to watch?" And Steve said, "Mind your own business," kind of thing. And my mates came and told me after. And within a couple of days, I got an invite to go down on trial. So I went down to the old Mitcham training ground and did very well. I remember Ian Wright and Mark Bright were very complimentary, and stayed with the family in Biggin Hill and travelled up for the week that I was on trial. And then quite simply at the end of the trial, Steve Coppell called me in, and I thought he's going to say, thanks but no thanks. And he said, "Do you want to play for Crystal Palace Football Club?" And I said yes. And so naive I was that he said, "Well, go home and get your stuff." And I was expecting him, to go home, have a week at home, come back. And he said, "Go home, get your stuff, see you in the morning." And of course, like Cannock is 180 miles away or what have you. So I went back, got the train back again. And for the next 2 years, looking back on it now, it was probably the most important time in my football career, because through Steve Coppell, Wally Downs, that was one of the coaches, Alan Smith, Steve Harrison, is that they essentially took the raw ingredients and helped teach me how to not just develop the skills that I had, but how to make runs as a striker. I played as a wide man very often, and all of those things benefited me without a doubt in the rest of my career. So for that, I've got a lot to thank Crystal Palace for.
Yeah, you came on as sub quite a lot in the wide position, didn't you? Was it hard breaking through with Wright and Bright?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost impossible. I mean, Wright and Brighty had just that pure telepathy between them. Brighty was the big, strong centre forward that held things up. Wrighty ran in behind. And I think that although, 6'4", I was probably the tallest winger in the country at the time, but I learned about movement left and right, and certainly when I went to Nottingham Forest, it was a central striker. But then when I went to Liverpool, utilising that ability that I learned at Crystal Palace to be able to break into wide positions helped me be relatively successful and have a partnership with Robbie Fowler. He would be the man in the box, and I would create assists for him and try and weigh him with my own goals. It was just very strange, really. It was a very strange time, because literally probably 2 or 3 years before playing for Palace, I was playing Sunday morning football. So to all of a sudden be playing in and around a side that had been in a cup final the season before, You know, we finished third in the league. I think at the end of the first season I was at Crystal Palace, and we went on my first trip to the States, which is where I go a lot on holidays now. Is that it gave me all of the grounding to be able to go on and have a 15-year football career.
And I remember you were quite popular with the fans.
Yeah.
You always used to get a good round of applause running up and down as a substitute. And then what happened to right left?
So righty left, and they bought with the money that they got. Marco Gabbiadini came in. Didn't really happen for him. Chris Armstrong then came in. It did happen for him. Even Chris Coleman was played up front. And the weird thing is, of course, he got converted at times from being a very good central defender to a centre forward. And it was just my luck that when Alan Smith and Steve Coppell decided to play as a centre forward, he scored goals. He then got his first Wales cap. I think he played against Austria away as a centre forward, scored. So all of the opportunities and avenues to be able to play as a central striker were not just shut on me, but Jamie Morley went on to play at Millwall and Watford and Crewe. And it was a difficult time, but it was a great time because we could watch all of these people coming in, whether it be Chris Coleman, whether it be Chris Armstrong or Marco Gabbiadini, and see all the little bits and pieces that they did. We were always taken for extra sessions after in the reserves, myself, Jamie Morley, Gary Thompson, that was a veteran striker as well, that helped bring us on. So although first team opportunities weren't, there weren't many of them as a central striker, I learnt a hell of a lot.
Back to the present day, the position Palace are in now is actually quite similar to when you joined. We've had a season in the top flight, did better than expected. Do you think they've got a good chance of establishing themselves in the Premier League?
I do. I mean, the irony is, I mean, when I get into debates on air, particularly recently with Newcastle fans, because I was quite vocal in support of Alan, for no other reason that I think he's a very good football manager, and I've said that many times in written columns and on air, is that Alan left Newcastle United with the second youngest squad in the Premier League. Constantly having the rug pulled from underneath him in terms of selling best players like Cabaye and Debuchy, and still managed to make them competitive. So when it was a case of Alan coming back home, if you like, to Selhurst Park with a squad with players like Zaha, Yannick Bolasie, Mile Jedinak, that I think is one of the Premier League's most underrated midfielders, players that had been brought in by Tony Pulis and that organisation, I always felt there's actually a kind of very similar quality in squad of Newcastle United and Crystal Palace already, and that's from a relatively new Premier League side. You know, Fraser Campbell gives pace, Marouane Chamakh has been dusted down and had an arm put round him, and he has more belief. But I certainly think that when you look at the scrap to stay in the Premier League, it's about how many chances can you create and how many goals can you score. Whether it's Bolasie, that I think has been exceptional, Zaha, Fraser Campbell, players of that kind of calibre, is that I feel that they're always going to have enough to be a threat against teams. And kind of with the rejuvenated Selhurst Park, the embracing of the fans in the Homesdale, and they're very passionate about their club, everything feels as if it's going forward in the right direction. And that's been borne out in virtually every Crystal Palace game that I've commentated on, whether it be this season or last season. Competitive, well organised, always create problems for other teams.
Seems like a great point to finish on. Thanks very much, Stan.
You're welcome.
Cheers.